In conversation with Audrey Penn. Audrey Penn is best known for a series of young children kissing hand books, beginning with the New York Times #1 bestseller, The Kissing Hand. Tangled Press, Mrs. Raccoon leads her corp Shakespeare through a series of childhood issues. In a series for older children 8 to 12 years old, beginning with Mystery at Blackbeard Cove, Audrey documents the mixed adventure of four children on Ocracoke NC who start looking for pirate treasure and find far more than they bargained for. In addition, Audrey stimulates excitement in writing with a copyrighted program, The Writer's Cave. Audrey has brought a program to schools across America, including several schools on Native American reservations. Audrey is a recognized speaker for both children and adults and has won numerous prestigious awards for her work. She lives in Doha, NC. And in today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy and excitement to have on the show today, Audrey Penn. How are you doing today, Audrey? Good evening from England.
I'm doing so well, and thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely, it's lovely, really, to have you on the show today. Quite exciting. We're here to sit and have a conversation around your work. I love the excitement already.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Audrey, I need to first say that I was taken aback by the description page of your book, The Kissing Hand, on Amazon. And I would like us to start this conversation by asking the many obvious questions most authors get asked. How does this book come about? What inspired you to write it? When did you start writing it? What compelled you to want to tell the story in The Kissing Hand? If you can have a foundation, a little bit of the foundation to the making of the book, that'll be fine.
To tell you the truth, I had no idea that this book was ever going to happen. I
Wow.
had a son, and we were visiting my mother, who lives near a park.
Mm.
And we had been to this park many times. We had been on this little train ride many times. We knew all of the ins and outs of the train ride. This one particular day, right in the middle of the train ride, the train stopped.
Oh,
And
wow.
the engineer was honking his horn and clapping his hands. Bell. Obviously, there was an animal that was on the train track. And he wasn't specific. He simply said, I'm not allowed to deal with animals. I have to go get a park ranger. Please stay on the train. To me, being a children's writer, I thought this was funny. Here, an animal was on the train track holding up this entire train full of people and adults and children. And I thought, what a great story. So I told my son to sit still and that I was going to get off the train. And I figured it was a deer. I tiptoed to the train to see the deer. And all of a sudden, this giant raccoon, I've never seen one that big in my life, got up and started
Mm.
hissing at me. And so I looked down and I tiptoed back. And when I saw the tiny cub that was next to the mother, and I was just spellbound. And I stood there and watched, and the mother suddenly turned around, took the baby's hand, put her nose in it, and the
Wow.
baby put his hand on his cheek. And I looked up at the sky and I said, thank you. And when I got back in the train, we finished the ride after they got the car, and I had no paper. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I had a paper bag full of groceries. So I emptied the grocery bag, and the first edition of The Kissing Hand was written on a paper grocery bag.
Wow.
But it was just the most loving, sweet, caring moment I had
Mm.
ever seen. It went right
Wow.
to my heart. And I took my son's hand and I kissed it. And I said, put it on your cheek. And now you can
Wow.
take my kiss wherever you. And
Oh.
that was the beginning.
Oh wow, I love the making of this book. I love the storyline behind the making of it. I love the foundation, getting to know that this is a beautiful story that inspired the making of this lovely book. Sounds quite amazing to me, really. Quite beautiful. And I love your illustration and, the little story you've shared so far. Quite beautiful, really. Thank you for sharing with us.
My pleasure.
And also, Audrey, when you first wrote The Kissing Hand, I'm curious, did you imagine Shakespeare Raccoon's story would grow into an entire series? Do you ever imagine that?
No, as a matter of fact, when I wrote it, I couldn't get it published. Every place I sent it to, they sent it back and said, "This is too sweet. Nobody's publishing books like this." And then I was part of a group of people that spoke at the Kennedy Center once a year for children who were disabled. And each of the presenters, like myself, are
Mm.
disabled. And so I was reading this dummy book that my artist and I made up of the kissing hand. And a woman approached me and she said, "I'm with the Child Welfare League. We would like to publish your book." And it was like, sure. And the surprise was she said, "We've never published a book, so you tell us what you want." Oh
Mm.
my gosh, is that not a gift? And when it came out, there was no publicity. It was all word of mouth and made it all the way to the New York Times bestseller list. And
Mm.
then once that got out, it started just to grow and grow and grow. And now it's in about 20 languages, maybe more. So
Wow.
that was a surprise. And it was never meant to be a series. That was accidental.
Wow.
That was an accident as well.
Wow. That is so inspiring.
You know, when you write something from your heart
Mm.
and you know it's true
Yeah,
and they turn you down, that's their problem. You just keep at it and you keep at it and you keep at it, and someone will hear you and someone
absolutely.
will find you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very true. Thank you. Now, Audrey, shifting from picture books to a young adult series about Blackbeard the Pirate is quite the leap. What sparked your interest in that project, and how did it challenge you creatively? If you would like to talk about that.
But the truth is, I wanted to write for young adults. I
Mm.
never thought of writing for the real little ones. And it wasn't until The Kissing Hand that I really continued the idea of writing about issues for the little ones. But when I was in 10th grade, my history teacher got me very interested in this character of Blackbeard the Pirate. And
Wow.
years later, I went to him and said, "If I wanted to write about Blackbeard the Pirate, where do I begin?" He said, "You
Mm.
begin by going to a place called Ocracoke Island, North Carolina, on the Outer Banks." So my
Mm.
girlfriend and I packed up our 5-year-old and 6-year-old and got in the car and we went down there. And there weren't even roads down there, there was still
Wow.
sand. And when I got there, I found out that the people that live there, they don't like to share and they don't like
Mm.
strangers.
Mm.
And
Wow.
it took a long, long time before I could get enough for them to like me, to believe in me, and for me to
Mm.
continue writing.
Oh, wow. That is quite a story, really.
But Blackbeard,
Oh, wow. And also, I wanted to ask you, each book in the Kissing Hand series explore a different emotional challenge from jealousy to grief to bullying to moving away, etc. What inspired the themes and stories behind the other books in the series beyond the original? I'm curious as well.
children, when I go to a school to speak, and I talk about the kissing hand or I talk about Mystery Blackbeard's Code,
Yeah.
I ask them, "What do you want me to write about?" Or, what's happening in your life?
Mm.
And also observation. The first thing that I observed was sibling rivalry with my great niece and my great nephew. And I thought,
Mm.
oh my gosh, there it is. And then this little girl on Ocracoke came to me and said, "I don't like bullies." And we talked about bullying.
Oh.
And it grew from there. I kept getting these ideas, but the children told me what to write.
Oh, wow. I love that. I love that the children told you what to write. That is quite beautiful. And it's so lovely of you to even, comply and how to go with what they suggested, which I think it's quite beautiful, really. Quite amazing. And also, your writing feels deeply empathetic. Did you always know you wanted to be a children's author, or did your background in ballet and choreography influence your storytelling in unexpected ways, maybe?
My report cards always said too much imagination. So I grew up having a very large imagination.
Oh.
And I always wrote, but something happened in the fourth grade. I wanted to talk to my mom about something, and she was
Mm.
quite busy. So I wrote it down and I put it on the dining room table. And she told me later that because I had written it, she was able to take her time to read it and not just,
Really?
hear it in one ear and go out the other. And for the first time, I understood, oh my gosh, I was just heard. I wrote it down and I was heard. That was the lesson. And so that's
This
when I started writing.
uh, that is quite a lovely one. That is a very, I think that tells as well the power of written words.
Yes.
The power of written words. Because it is through the written words that you're able to captivate and get our attention to, want to read it, rather than you saying, I wanted to say something like, oh, I don't have the time now, but you have the time to read it, which I think it's power of written words are quite amazing. Yeah.
I really encourage children to keep a journal,
Journal, diary.
and that every evening before they go to sleep, write down one thing that they remember from that day
Oh,
and just write it down.
that is beautiful. That's a lovely thing to teach kids. Yeah. I never had someone tell me to do that when I was young. Well, that was a very lovely thing to tell kids to do. Wow. And I think even me as a parent, I'll be more interested in what my son or daughter would love to write or, for the day. It's a very lovely one to tell children to keep journal. That's a beautiful one. Yeah. Thank you.
I
This is
have a
quite,
daughter all time expressing herself. So I
yeah.
asked her to draw something first and describe the drawing, and that was
Oh,
helpful.
oh, wow. Art is amazing. Thank you. Thank you for this lovely feedbacks. Now, apart from the books we've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
Oh, yes. It's called Blackbeard's Legacy Shared Time. It's the fourth book in the Mystery of Blackbeard's Cove series, but it can also stand on its own. And it's how Blackbeard the Pirate related to the Civil War, which was 150 years later in this country.
Wow. Wow.
And it was the first thing that I learned about Blackbeard the Pirate. And that was when he purchased his ship, he found slaves in the hold and it made
Mm.
him sick. He did
Oh.
not like the treatment of slaves.
Mm.
And also that he had places where he hid, of course. And those places later were used for runaway slaves to hide. So
Mm.
150 years later, he saved their lives.
Wow. That's a beautiful one. And it's quite exciting to know that you've got a book going on. That's quite amazing as well. Quite commendable. You're doing a lot, Audrey. I hope you find some time to sleep. Thank you. So that was so fun to know, really. Now I wanted to get your feedback. I know you write for children, yeah? Well, I wanted to get your feedback if your works have ever been misinterpreted in any way or any format. Because one of the things I love about literature is to sit back and listen to readers' feedback. And sometimes
Yeah.
I understand the fact that some readers may get a message intended by the author. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. Sometimes they might be far. And sometimes they might hilariously misunderstand the book and interpret it upside down. So that wanted to make me to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your works differently than you intended? How does that make you feel as a writer? If in any way you've ever had such experience.
For the most part, what I write is interpreted the way that I meant it to
Intended.
be. But when the kissing hand came out, there were some indignant parents that said I was warning the children about the dangers in life.
Oh,
Well, there are dangers in life, and there are things that we
absolutely.
worry about.
Mm.
Also, in sign language, this means I love you. and they were interpreting it as something within the devil. And so that had to be, corrected. I had to answer
Of course.
that. So there were a few things like that, but far in between. For the most part, to tell you the truth, I've got where's the thing?
Lovely
This
feedbacks.
was this was made in after the 25th anniversary. These are letters to Chester. These are some letters that I've received about the kissing hand.
Oh,
Everything
wow. That's
uh,
lovely.
connection to their child in heaven, to just children themselves who wrote and said, I was so scared to go to school, and this really helps.
Hmm.
And I mean, I've got trunks and trunks and trunks filled with letters, and each one I hope I've answered.
Wow. That's evidence that your literature is touching and impacting lives, which is very important. And I think this is
Uh,
one of the joys of writers, hearing feedbacks of this nature.
yeah,
It gives an unexplainable joy. Yeah, I can relate. That must have been so soothing for you.
yeah.
Just
Even I still get emails and
oh
letters, and
wow.
it's
Wow.
incredible,
Incredible.
incredible. And
Really
with Mystery of
incredible.
Blackbeard for my fourth book, I had a teacher come to me and say, I heard your presentation about Blackbeard, which is really funny. It's
Mm.
really, really funny when I go to this entertain the kids. And she gave me a letter and she said, my great great grandfather was a 10-year-old deck boy or a young boy that was on the ship that was attacked by Blackbeard. And
Oh.
25 years later, he wrote about it and she
Oh
gave me the
wow.
letter
Oh
and said,
wow.
I mean, I
Mm.
never thought of these things about Blackbeard, but because he wrote it, because he saw it, it
Yeah.
was the truth. It was,
Yeah.
and that's in the fourth.
Oh wow, I love that. I love that. I love that it even makes you feel that way. Quite beautiful, really. Now, I wanted to ask you, are there any challenges you've encountered in the process of writing this book? And also ever since it got published? Is there any challenges associated with you being a published author, if in any way?
Oh yeah, you have to be aware that you're dealing with opinions,
Mm.
and you can't argue with an opinion.
At all, you can't.
You know, if someone has an opinion, they're not going to normally change it.
At all.
And like I said before, you just have to follow your heart and keep at it. And
Yeah.
now it's tougher to get published than when I was published. And I walked into it quite by accident. When I
Mm.
was in New York dancing, I knew I was sick. So I knew that my time was limited. And
Mm.
before I left, I wrote a thank you letter to the people that were in the cast, the people that were in the crew. And
Mm.
about 2 years later, I got
Yeah.
a phone call that said, we'd like to publish your book. And I
Oh,
said,
wow.
I never wrote a book to be published. And they said, you didn't write Happy Apple Told Me? I said, yes,
Mm.
how did you get it? They said, you didn't send it. I said, no. And to this day, I have no idea who sent it.
Wow.
And that was the beginning. And it was a Caldecott nominee. So
Wow.
it was easier for me to put my foot in. But even so, it was looking and asking and begging and
Mm.
sending and copywriting. Make sure
Yeah,
that your book is protected, protected, protected before.
absolutely. That's a great one you've got in there. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Now, just in case we have some viewers who are watching this interview and would love to get a copy of any of your books, on what platform are they available on for purchase?
I would think mostly Amazon or any of the big bookstores like, Barnes and Noble.
Mm.
Um, has everything,
Mm.
including my brand new Easter book. I
Oh,
mean,
really? Show them to the camera. That'll be nice.
I had always had a question, why was it a bunny rabbit that delivered eggs? So I was reading this 19th century storybook, and I came
Mm.
across this little story, and I went ahead and kind of changed it around and made it my own.
Mm.
And it came out this Easter, but it came out very late, so next Easter
Wow.
it'll be easier to get.
Wow, quite amazing.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I even love your excitement talking about these books. Quite amazing. Yeah. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Audrey Penn's books directly on Amazon, on Barnes& and Nobles, on our website, and also on other platforms. I also left a link to our social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Audrey, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. And most of this conversation is so lovely, so amazing, having you talk about your amazing literature works. Thank you so much.
This was wonderful, and thank you for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you as well.